Hello everyone, welcome to UPSC Simplified. In this session, we are going to discuss one more question from UPSC mains previous year papers. Now, the question we have today is regarding ocean salinity. In this question, you can read that question is asking on the various reasons which lead to changes in oceanic salinity and its effect. So we'll go through question once. So account for variations in oceanic salinity and discuss its multidimensional effect is our question. By and large, this question is again very simple and straight. You don't have to guess what this question exactly is asking for. You know in what parts you are supposed to write your answer also. We'll try to find what is the locus and what is the focus for this particular question. So if we look at the locus is salinity obviously. So everything we are going to talk about in this particular question will be regarding salinity, variations in salinity, okay, and their effects. So our focus becomes the variation in salinity and what effects are going to be there as a result of variation in this salinity. So having defined locus and focus, we will move on to next part. So let us try to understand what will be the ideal conclusion in this particular question. Now when it comes to the writing conclusion in geography, we find that sometimes it becomes very difficult to have a very ideal conclusion or a very good conclusion, because most of the time you will find question is straight. There is absolutely no scope to give context to your introduction, right? And sometimes what will happen that there is also no scope to write definition. Okay, so by and large we write fact in introduction or we define in introduction. So geography questions will always have difficulties while introducing with the question and while concluding with the question. So that is something you need to keep in mind, and that is why I am insisting on this particular fact. Do not try to find a very perfect conclusion or introduction when it comes to geography question, because in that particular practice you will waste a lot of time. So see, if you can define anything, define it. If you can put any fact, please put a fact in it. Now when it comes to this particular question, there is absolutely nothing which we can define. So I am going with very generic introduction, and my introduction is regarding average oceanic salinity. So I will see that the average oceanic salinity is 35 ppt, and across the globe we find certain variations in this salinity. In that introduction, I can also write that the variations we find may be because of some natural factors and some anthropogenic factors. So that could be my introduction. So I have said, you see, average is 35 ppt, and what do we find? We find variation which may be because of natural as well as anthropogenic factors. So having introduced, we will move on to the next part, that is part 1 of the question. See, when it comes to dividing various parts in this question, in this particular question has 2 parts. One, we have to give account for variation in oceanic salinity, and second will be multidimensional effect. Now when I am providing body part, there is part 1 of the body in which I can mention all these factors which will result into variation of oceanic salinity. Now all these factors which I have mentioned here, these are mostly natural, but at some places we will also find anthropogenic causes. Fine. So you may go for this particular approach where you are having natural causes and anthropogenic causes. That can be your way. Or you can just mention various factors, and in that particular factor, wherever anthropogenic causes are applicable, I'll tell you wherever these are applicable, we will mention that here in these particular cases anthropogenic causes are also available. Fine. So you can take any line, either write these factors which are very static or go for natural and anthropogenic section. Now I'm not going to go in details of all these factors because these are self-explanatory. By and large, if you want to see the variation in oceanic salinity, this variation will be a result of only two things. One, the rate of evaporation, and another thing which will be nothing but the addition of fresh water. Fine. So I hope you are getting my point, that whenever we talk about the variation in oceanic salinity, it can either be because of evaporation of oceanic water or because of addition of fresh water. Now evaporation is dictated by all these things. Latitude wise temperature will change, and as per temperature rate of evaporation changes and salinity changes. Similarly, you can also write for temperature. Various parts of the ocean have different temperatures, and since they have different temperatures, salinity may vary. Rate of evaporation. Now rate of evaporation is nothing but an outcome of temperature. Okay? So you can also mention that rate of evaporation is also a important point. And similarly, we can also write about winds. So when it comes to wind, if there is windy situation, it increases the rate of evaporation, which may result into higher salinity, right? Now when you are writing all these points, you need to keep in mind, merely writing these points is not sufficient, not enough. At every case you also have to present an example. Fine. So example is something which is must here. So write example also. As per latitude, you will say at lower latitudes salinity is high because of higher evaporation. As we go to higher latitude, evaporation will be lower and salinity is also low. Similarly, for temperature, rate of evaporation and winds, you can give respective examples. All this discussion is regarding natural phenomena. I will also add some anthropogenic causes. Now what I will say in this particular part, when I am adding anthropogenic causes, I will say, you see, there is global warming, and the result of global warming is what? Temperature is rising, oceanic temperatures have also risen, and ultimately as there has been temperature rise, salinity in several parts of the ocean has increased. Okay, so earlier I addressed natural causes, and in the same part I'll also then add the anthropogenic cause, that is global warming, rising temperatures and salinity increase. Moving to this point, influx of fresh water. Again, wherever there is large influx of fresh water, there will be lower salinity. So you can talk about the regions such as Bay of Bengal, where there are a lot of rivers which are flushing a lot of fresh water, and even if Bay of Bengal has a higher temperature, it has a lower salinity. You can talk about equatorial regions because there is a lot of rainfall which is taking place in equatorial regions. It will also lead to lesser salinity. Fine. So again, in influx of fresh water, I have mentioned natural causes. Now I also have one anthropogenic cause. What is my anthropogenic cause? Anthropogenic cause is the melting of glaciers. Now when it comes to melting of glaciers, it adds a lot of fresh water, and specifically at higher latitudes. And as these glaciers are melting, it is adding a lot of fresh water into the oceans, which will decrease the salinity of ocean, right? So that is how we are addressing natural as well as anthropogenic causes and giving an account of variation in the salinity of ocean. Fine. So we have satisfactorily addressed first part of the question. Now we will move on to the next part of the question. Next part is the multidimensional effect. Now multidimensional effects can be clubbed into two categories. Whenever it comes to the salinity, it will either have effect on climate or it may have effect on marine life. Fine. Now when it comes to salinity, the salinity of ocean is likely to have impact on rainfall. When it comes to climate, there could be an impact on rainfall. There could be one more impact, that would be on tropical cyclones. So you have to mention, if the salinity of oceanic water is increasing, it may result into lessening of rainfall. In whatever regions salinity has risen, there are correlations, or there are certain data which suggest that the rainfall is decreasing. Similarly, for tropical cyclones, we can say with the rise in salinity, the frequency of tropical cyclone is also increasing. Now, these are the areas where a lot of research is being conducted. We do not have very specific answers whenever it comes to the variation in salinity and the multidimensional or whatever effect it has on global climate. So that part cannot be so satisfactorily addressed, but you have to mention a link, that there is link between climate, specifically in terms of rainfall and tropical cyclones. Fine. Now, having addressed that part, there is another part, that is marine life. Now, if salinity varies, there will be multi-pronged effect on marine life. Now, why we are saying that there would be multi-pronged effect on marine life? So, we need to understand the life of marine animals or marine species. Now, when it comes to marine species, their tolerance to salt is very, very limited. They can only survive in limited range of salinity. They do not have a very high range of tolerance towards salinity, and that is why even the slightest change in salinity will result into what? It will result into effect on marine life. Also, in this particular case, you have to mention one more part. Specifically, when glaciers melt, a lot of fresh water is added on the polar region, and in those particular areas, it affects the marine life there, because this particular fresh water will stay afloat as it has lesser density, because it is less saline, and the saline water will go downwards, and that is how marine ecosystem will be affected, and marine plants and animals will find it difficult to survive in such environments. Fine. So that can be your line of answer when it comes to marine life. Now, additionally, you can write one more thing. If salinity changes in salinity will also have effect on circulation. Circulation of what? Circulation of oceanic water, because there is something called as deep sea current or density driven current. We will call it as deep sea current, or there is another name, that is density driven current. Whatever circulation which occurs in the deeper parts of the ocean, we are talking about that. There is one more name, thermohaline circulation. So this thermohaline circulation will also be altered as there is a change in density because of change in salinity. So these are few effects which you have to explain. Now, there are not many effects, but you have to explain each and every single effect when it comes to the effects of variation in salinity. So we have addressed second part also. Let's see what can be drawn in map. So in map, you can show salinity across various regions. Okay. So just identify where there is high salinity. These will be the particular regions where there will be high salinity and low salinity regions. All these you need to address. In conclusion, we can simply say, again, there will be some difficulty while writing a conclusion. So just say that we can limit these variations which are being caused by man-made or anthropogenic reasons, and there are various ways in which this can be stopped. Like we can have some control on climate change, some control towards global warming, all these things which can be mentioned in this particular conclusion. So again, conclusion will not be as specific as we have in other subjects, it can be a generic conclusion again. Okay, so that was all about the question on oceanic salinity. We'll see you again in next session.